Hello, welcome to Tammy DecoArt. This is a landscape, which was the December challenge for the Patreon group in Cause Creations. So I decided, of course, to go big because that's my favorite size, anything in a big canvas. I used Payne's Gray and mixed multiple versions, probably 4 different shades of Payne's Gray, using white to lighten it to a very light, a medium, a darker medium, and then a dark, which was the Payne's Gray without any white paint. This is the sky portion, and I find that it's easier when you're doing landscape flip cups like this to tape off with wide tape because the tilting process can be a little interesting. And of course, you're going to see my head in here multiple times because this is a big canvas. It's 36 by 48. And I have to get on both sides. It also was a challenge to film it because of the size. I'm doing basically a horizontal, mostly a horizontal tilting because I wanted the sky to be very fluid and more of a left to right. I had some missing paint there on the bottom of the screen. You can see I added some. It's a challenge to tilt this much paint and not go over your paint line. You do have to some extent, tilt back just to get your paint going in the right direction. And be a little creative with how you work through it. Now, if your paint goes over your tape line, don't stress over that because once this dries, I'll be painting the water, so that would cover any paint that was there if it did go over the tape line. The challenge with doing bigger pieces is, of course, it takes longer for them to dry. And while you could go ahead and pour your water at the same time as your sky, I like to, if time allows, give that top portion time to set up and mostly be dry before I start doing the water because the water requires a lot more tilting. I do like to let those dry whenever possible. I do remove the tape though while this paint is still wet. And it's important to have a big enough space that you can pull that tape and let it kind of just sit under the canvas while things dry. Here's the water portion. The top is dry. I tilted up my canvas, so I'm doing somewhat of a waterfall flip cup approach. I'm using those darker shades of Payne's Gray. And this is an area that when you're doing multiple flip cups in a middle section of your canvas like this, it is difficult sometimes to maintain a straight horizon line. So I do work on the top part of this water first and sort of use my popsicle stick to nudge up to that sky. And one of the things I also like to do is lay down a line of my darkest color right up against the sky so that I have a straight horizon. And I did actually have to come in with a paintbrush and fix that horizon later, which unfortunately I did not film. But you can see how these bottom flip cups I'm doing are lighter than the top section of flip cups. I'm also laying down just some straight paint colors in order to get that tape line wet. And one of the things that I like to do when I do a landscape pour is lay down that line of paint right on the cloud edge so that I have something to tilt towards that's going to be somewhat straight. I use my stick to sort of push up into that cloud line And then when I start tilting, I know exactly how far to tilt. Now this is a lot of paint, so I used, I wasn't really counting, I used big solo cups that are 16 ounces, and they were pretty full. I've been asked in the past why I use so much paint, and one of the reasons I do that is because I sell my work, and I want to make sure I have enough paint on the canvas that I can tilt to get the composition that I want. And that means you need to use a little more paint than necessary, and it gives you some freedom and flexibility with tilting off areas that you like or don't like, and then you don't have to rush to add paint somewhere that looks odd. So yes, I tilted off quite a bit. I'm doing what I call extreme tilting, which is almost straight up and down. You can't see it because it's tilting the other direction, but you can see there where I have gradient water colors from those many different shades of Payne's gray. And now I am trying to straighten out that horizon line. I did come in with a brush afterwards and straighten that out. I actually taped it off and painted up to the horizon line to make sure it was uniform and straight. And now I'm just tilting off my water to get the effect that I want. This is a fun multiple flip cup and embellishment piece. I really enjoy being part of Cause's Patreon group. We get new challenges each month, and it's a lot of fun. Plus, the members of the Patreon group are a lot of fun. Now I'm just swiping on that horizon edge, and I don't swipe any other areas. I had considered swiping white in for some foamy waves, but I decided to add those with a brush later. I live in Southwest Florida on the Gulf Coast, and in this area we don't have a lot of waves, so I wanted to make my waves very subtle and closer to the shore, so I decided to add those with a brush later once this dries, which of course I missed recording those, but this is my final tilting on this water, just making sure that I have the color gradients that I'm looking for, tilting it back and forth, and then I come in with a texture on the bottom. And of course, being here in Southwest Florida, we have a lot of beaches, and I tend to do a lot of resin beaches, but I decided after this water was dry to come in with texture, and I painted underneath with Amsterdam Silver, which is, it's actually more of a champagne color. And I do that because sometimes your texture doesn't go all the way through, especially on the edges. So I always do an underpainting. And this is real sand mixed with some spackle and paint. I used Titanium Buff Light, Champagne, DecoArt Champagne, and some regular Titanium White to get this very light ivory shade. So I'm applying all of my sand, and I use ultrafine sand. I'm applying all of my sand first with a big spatula, a cooking spatula, not a painting spatula, and making sure I have my edges, my sides covered. This is a fairly thick layer, and now I'm working on that edge where it meets the water. I get a good uniform amount down, and then I come in with a palette knife and work on the actual texture of it. In Southwest Florida, we have a lot of groomed beaches, and they tend to leave uniform marks. So I wanted my beach to look as close to that as possible. I'm using this pie server to nudge my sand up to the water, and really just trying to make sure that I have a uniform line and edge, because laying down all that texture sometimes can be a little bit challenging to keep the line straight and the beach straight. And then I use that. This is just a kitchen tool. It's a pie server, basically. I like it because it is wide and flat, and it has that rounded end, which is not as pointed as some palette knives. And it works really well. It's got a nice angled handle. Now I'm adding in that texture of the beach scene that we typically see in this area, and flattening it out to make it a little bit more even. I drop small bits of champagne colored glass and mother of pearl shells on this texture while it is wet. And while I find that sometimes that's not quite enough to keep the beach and shells intact, the best advice I can give you is when you drop those things onto wet sand or wet texture, take a flat palette knife and push down on them. Here I'm making my signature wavy beach. Even my resin pieces that have texture and beaches get this sort of wavy effect. I'm just cleaning up some extra. I come in multiple times with different thicknesses of this beach wave effect, and I find that that gives a lot of visual interest, especially when working with a piece that I have tilted side to side with a very horizontal orientation. That this provides a little interest in that texture on the bottom. Now, spackle dries really fast, as does acrylic paint, and there's no pouring mediums or anything else mixed in with this texture. So I let this dry really well for a couple of days before I came in, and I will use a spray varnish, a satin spray varnish on this piece, because the spray obviously is important for the textured portion, and also it helps keep those pieces of glass and shells on the textured portion as well. So multiple coats of spray varnish help keep that in place. Though after I'm done scattering the glass and mother of pearl, I do take a flat palette knife and push those down into the texture. And that's a really important step to make as well. And now I'm just looking at where do I have open spots? Where do I need a little bit more? I love this Moonlight Champagne fire glass. It's a really sparkly effect without being overly glittery. It's very subtle and nice. And now I'm pushing in those shells so that they get mired down in that texture, and hopefully stick, as well as the spray varnish. That helps as well. Now, what I did off camera that you don't see here is I straightened up my horizon line by putting another piece of tape in the sky section and using a brush and dry brushing on white, some shades of the cerulean blue, or the lighter blue, I'm sorry, color, as well as the Payne's gray to straighten that horizon line. It's important when you create multiple colors from one shade of paint, like Payne's gray in this case, to keep small amounts of that paint for later if you need to straighten out anything or fix something in your painting. And I did not keep my sky colors. I ended up mixing them again for the water, which was a mistake, so I had to mix new colors. So here is the piece on display. I did come in and add some small waves with a brush. This piece is fully varnished and ready. It sparkles and glitters beautifully. It is on display currently at Arts Bonita in their instructor exhibit, which will be through mid-January. And I really love the sky of this landscape piece. It's just gorgeous. Here it is in a home setting. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, and share with me some feedback on this landscape. I appreciate your time today. Have a great day.